Yeah. If I'm going to lose money on it because the market had a downturn, I'm certainly waiting for that opportunity. That opportunity that everybody's
Right.
talking about. Oh, it's the deals are coming. The deals are coming. When they're at the height of the market and everybody's like, wait till this all
Right.
implodes or explodes. And then we're going to go pick up the pieces. That shark mentality that real estate investors always get accused of. We're not creating it, but we're sure ready. We're sure ready for it. So if I'm going to lose money by buying something at the height and it comes apart for whatever reason, like 2008, interest rates in 2023, I feel like I need to also be prepared to make money on the
Yeah.
backside to fix it. So I'm certainly not going to be one of those people who gets burned on the high side and then lets that make me afraid that now I'm going to miss out on the opportunity on the low side. You've got to be willing to take advantage of both. Take my lumps here, and boy, is that going to create opportunity because other people took their lumps like I did,
Right.
but I'm better diversified, better capitalized, and better networked to be able to go out and clean up the mess that certain people make.
Welcome to the Cashflow Fight Club podcast. In the Champions Corner edition, I'm Mike Deaton, and together with Ligia, my co host in life, business, and this podcast, we're taking you into the training room, deep in the dojo, sharing the secrets of what it takes to forge a champion. We're digging deep into mindset mastery, high performance habits, best in class behaviors, and bringing you the tips and techniques that maximize human potential, brought to you from some of the best in the business.
So grab your buds and your seat, hit subscribe, and get ready to up your game. Let's do the show.
Let's do it. Welcome to another In the Champions Corner episode of the Cashflow Fight Club podcast, where we dive deep into the strategies, experiences, and stories of those fighting to achieve financial freedom. Today, we have a special guest, Emma Powell. Emma's a full-time real estate investor with a truly inspiring journey. From running a successful photography business to building a major real estate empire, Emma has done it all. She shares how she transitioned from a dream of early retirement to creating a diverse portfolio of investments in commercial real estate. In this episode, Emma opens up about what it took to get started in real estate, why she pivoted to focus on cash flow instead of yield, and how she balances being a mother of 6 with running a thriving business. We'll also dive into the role of partnerships, creative financing, and why diversification has been the key to her success. So if you're wondering how to break into real estate, manage your risk, retire early, or simply juggle multiple hats in life, this episode's for you. Stick around because Emma's story will leave you inspired and ready to take action. Let's dive in. All right. Emma Powell, thanks so much for joining us on the Cashflow Fight Club podcast. We're excited to dig in.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I love the name of the show.
We have fun with it. Yeah. When we were talking about starting up a podcast, we really wanted to do
Yeah.
something a little different and have some fun. So we'll have to have you. So we do another type of podcast episode where we match up different investing styles, right? So like multifamily against single family flips or single family rentals or something, and debate the pros and cons of that. Those are a lot of fun, but they're hard to schedule. Even these one-on-ones are hard to schedule sometimes. So it's good to
Yeah,
go.
I think that I would be under the diversification flag on that fight, and you'd have a tough time putting me up against somebody that I would necessarily disagree with.
Yeah. Well, most of our matchups go that way. They're like
Yeah.
friendly. Oh, that's
Yeah.
great. I love that.
Yeah, I'll invest in your deal, you invest in my deal, and then everybody's
Yeah,
doing
we've had a hard challenge finding anybody who's really willing to take off the gloves or do anything, but that's a podcast for another day. But we got into it a little bit. Why don't you give us some background on who is Emma in a nutshell and kind of what brought you into real estate?
I'm a full-time real estate investor. I always had a goal to retire early, but probably in my 30s, just started seeing a little bit of a pipe dream. I remember we were talking to a neighbor of ours who was about 50, and we just did a block party, right? We're out at a picnic, eating burgers and watermelon. And the typical question of, what do you do for a living? He's, oh, I'm retired. And I'm just looking at him like, how old are you? And he said, oh, I retired when I was 7 or whatever he said. And he was going back to school to become a marriage and family therapist because he had been building storage units, like brand new air conditioned, class A, beautiful storage units. And I'm like, oh, you own that one and that one. I knew where they were.
Uh-huh.
And I just thought to myself, Shen, we have been missing out. And I just was thinking to myself, like, I've always wanted to retire by 50, but we just had given up at that point. And then we heard what he said. And he said something like, making money is just so easy, it gets boring. So what would that life be like? And
Yeah.
he wasn't living with a private jet. He lived around the corner from us. We could afford a house in the same neighborhood. Our kids played together. I was friends with his wife. And I just remember feeling like, what would it be like to not have to go to work, to be able to work part time, to be able to go chase a passion like getting a new degree or changing careers? And my husband and I at that point both worked part time. And so I'd had a taste of it and knew that it was a lifestyle that we liked. We started homeschooling our kids to get more freedom. And then years went by. I never did anything about it. Occasionally I'd get on a sales website and look up storage units. And he'd call me every once in a while, especially after we moved out of that neighborhood and bought some acreage. He's like, "Hey, do you want to build some storage units on your acreage? I have way too many customers. I would love to be able to help you guys out." And he never really talked to us about investing with us. And I don't know if I really got how that worked at that point. And we'd have a friend also who did hard money lending or borrowing rather for his flips. And he tried to get us to lend money to him. And we just were not ready. So my husband got laid off again in the tech industry. And instead of finding a job local in Austin, where we'd lived for 20 years, he found a job across the country. So we, in a matter of a couple of weeks, packed up in 2017 and just moved to Salt Lake City for a new job, a good opportunity. But I had left my photography business behind back in Texas. And I never really did anything with the real estate. It was one of those things where I know I should, but I don't really know how. And a lot of the listeners are probably in the same boat. They hear how great it is, but when it comes down to the nitty gritty of actually getting invested, either doing it on your own or passively investing with somebody else, we get bogged down in the details. And because we're not quite sure if it's as good as everybody says, there's a little bit of doubt and hesitation. We're like, oh, I don't know. We put it off. Public markets are so much easier. You just get a Robinhood account, connect your ACH, and there's money. But in the private markets, there just needs to be a little bit more attention to either owning your own properties or passively investing with other people. There are more documents, just more stuff going on. And most people just don't ever take the time to learn about it. So I found myself in this crossroads when we moved to Salt Lake City where suddenly I had time to learn about it. My kids were a little bit older. They weren't needing as much daily attention from me. And I just sat down and caught myself one day watching stupid cat videos on YouTube, wondering what I was going to do with the rest of my life. And really just got into the financial side of things. We had this new job. He was getting paid more. We had more opportunities. We had just sold our house in Texas and we had probably $500,000 just sitting in the bank from the sale of that house. We had no debt. We were renting our house. What are we going to do with this? And it's finally time to learn because when you have money burning a hole in your pocket, that can be motivating. Not only did we have the money, but I also had the time. So I started learning about it, really just joined every local club, every local meetup, signed up for a couple of free mentorships, a couple of like low cost ones. I wasn't out there to spend a ton of money at the beginning. I did do one high price mentorship and with the goal, like I will make the money back on the first deal, which I did. And then decided I hated that kind of real estate, but it gave me so much knowledge and education that I ended up switching over into the commercial side of things and using those same creative financing techniques that I'd learned from the residential side that I hated doing, but was able to then go buy properties instead of trying to wholesale, basically getting other people to sell their property to you for whatever. I was able to go and talk to owners of small apartment buildings and things like that and say, "Hey, I'll buy your building. Let's work this out." Especially if they were older buildings that nobody else wanted because the seller knew he didn't have anybody to buy it. And people would tell me I was in over my head on that one, but I have run businesses for many years. I watched and my husband's worked in startups. I have a business degree and we have a ton of construction experience. We both grew up in very handy families. My dad built all of our houses. My husband's dad built their houses. And we got together in that house that we sold in Texas. We basically put it back together from the ground up, tore it almost down and put it back up. So we had a ton of construction experience and business management experience. So I felt like I can take on these projects that nobody else wants because the business management side and the construction side didn't intimidate me. It's not exactly the best path for everybody, but if you have that kind of background, I think that these can be really good fits because they're really easy to get into. They're really cheap and nobody else wants them because they're a lot of work. So if you're willing to put the work in and you have some background experience, that's basically how we got started. And from there, you get better and better. People start offering you more deals, more people want to invest with you, and you can start upgrading to more like class B properties that aren't so much work. And that's basically what we've spent the last couple of years doing, as well as focusing more on our own passive income, retiring, and be able to think about cash flow. So we've now become private money lenders ourselves, where we're lending out our personal cash and then started a fund to help other people put their cash in so that we can do private loans together, which is just straight interest rate payment. and a little bit of equity where we do some profit sharing with projects that we believe will perform better than a private loan would. So that's it in the couple of minute nutshell. I know there are a lot of details there, a lot of rabbit holes we can go
Yeah,
down that
a
you.
lot to unpack. That's great.
And did you come to the conclusion that it's easy to make so much money and that you're actually bored, just like your neighbor did? No.
Now, to be fair, I think his business cash flows better than our business does. And so that's why we made the pivot about 18 months ago to find a business that cash flowed better. Because when you're doing investing for yield and net worth, can you imagine you take on a 30 unit apartment building and you have investors in there who are getting paid before you are, and you are working and you're just not making any money. And so that's a long-term plan. So we have apartments that we have collected along the way, some of which we sold, some of them we still need to sell. We're still at the later stages of the business cycle on those. And we're just waiting for a sale to get paid. And you get paid in these huge chunks of cash. You're always terrified. When are we going to get paid again? What happens when we sell this last building? Are we killing the golden goose? And so that fear that we were experiencing regularly, and that stress of we'll just put it on a 0% credit card and hopefully it sells for what we hope it'll sell for. Like that's not a great lifestyle. That's not boring. Day to day can be a little bit like, well, how long do we want to keep this hustle up? How long do we want to keep flipping buildings? How long do we want to keep stressing about money? And so I think that when you get to the point where you realize that cash flow is more important than yield, that's how you know that you're probably retired. Because people who are still working for steady paychecks sometimes can't really appreciate the irregular paycheck problem that an entrepreneur or a retired person will have. And yes, once we got a handle on our cash flow and we're just slowly selling off buildings and reinvesting that passively, things have calmed down a little bit. We're not quite as nervous, stressed out, scared. We try to have 2 years of income in the bank at all times, or 2 years of expenses in the bank at all times. And then everything on top of that, we go and invest. And so that has really helped us. And yeah, things have really slowed down. And sometimes it is a little boring. Sometimes you wonder, what is my purpose in life? And that's one of the reasons I started the fund, helping other people do it, because that helps, that scratches my itch to teach people, help people, and just to go out and build something bigger than I could do by myself.
Yeah, it's a wonderful journey, and like I said, there is a ton to unpack there. But I feel like we're in very similar places. Lygia and I are also looking at how can we invest in things that are going to long term cash flow, so that we're not always chasing, which we don't mind doing now. It's fun. It's we enjoy our land business a lot. We've gotten into commercial real estate. We're also doing some things there, but that's also, as you mentioned, a bit more of a flipping model where, especially in the syndication space, where deals have a life cycle. And in order to get the equity out, you need to have some type of event. And then you're chasing the next deal. And then you're always on this pursuit of increasing the yield and the returns. And yeah, having investors in deals really amps up the complication and the stress, because good stewards of people's money are really conscious about are we delivering on our promises? Are we over delivering what we want when troubles
Yeah.
happen and things? And so, yeah, it really adds an element of stress that's not so peaceful. So if you can find those cash flowing businesses and just nurture those over time, that's a great way to go. I love your kind of spark that started you just having a backyard conversation or a neighborhood conversation and getting going. I think the power of real estate and cash flow is so compelling that once you get a taste of it, even if it's just in conversation, that's what got us. Like, we just got hooked once cash flow started coming in, and you realize how much freedom you actually can engineer in a lot of these deals, especially as you being a mom of many children and a desire to be a stay-at-home mom and all of that. The great thing. How do you, maybe you don't have to worry about this anymore, but in those early days, I'm assuming you were juggling a lot of hats and balancing mom duties and real estate. Was it just a matter of grinding it out, or did you have some help or some systems or anything like that kind of help you get your start?
Yeah, I'm a big believer in systems, but I'm not an ultra micro system kind of person. I'm more of the type who is going to look for a higher category or an umbrella. If I fix this one thing, how many downstream details can it fix so that
Hmm.
I'm not having to pay attention to the details? So taking care of first things first, putting the big rocks in before the sand type of analogies is really how I think. And so for me, it was looking at what is the biggest bottleneck or the biggest roadblock. And you learn that like in business school and process management when you're looking at a manufacturing system and there's a bottleneck. And so that's where your attention goes. So I tend to be the person who looks for macro solutions and bottleneck types of solutions. So for me, managing the kids, has really come down to managing the way that we homeschool. And so without getting too far off track there, I do the same thing in my rentals. There's something I do, Mr. Landlord calls it tenant empowerment, I think. He came to speak at one of our local real estate clubs. And I had already been following some of his teachings and programs before I met him. And he came in and really just solidified, like, I'm on the right track here. It's the same thing Southwest Airlines does, where then a customer comes up and they complain, and that employee is empowered up to a certain dollar amount to be able to solve problems on their own with their own creativity. So I empower my kids to do that with their education. When I don't force push a lot of formal education when they're little, probably till about middle school, older middle schools, where we start talking about more formal stuff like learning how to write a written essay, learning even how to do written math, because math is like doing it in your heads when you're doing fractions on a recipe, or you take your kids to Mexico and they're having to convert pesos to dollars and you teach them these little mental math tricks. That's how we homeschool. And then when they get a little bit older, it's time to say, okay, if you want to have this career or have that goal or something, let's map out a plan to get there. But by then they're old enough to be empowered to take care of that on their own. I'll give you an example. My daughter just turned 18, graduated high school last June, and today she asked which car she should drive down to the local community college campus. And I was like, what? I had sent her a link, I don't know, about 6 weeks ago that said, hey, you need to take these assessment exams to get into community college. And today she's signed up for classes and she's going to school. I'm like, oh, good job for taking care of that. So that's how you simplify, delegate, eliminate. It's all of those same things. So the way that we homeschool helps me to just, when I'm spending time with the kids, it's more emotional bonding and mother time and less like there's a relationship complication there that comes in when I take on the role of educator. My husband put it best. He said, if we don't like the way the school system works, why are we trying to recreate it at home? And why are we turning my wife into the teacher? We don't think it's doing a very good job down at the local school anyway. That's true. You're basically making your kids hate education when you're trying to like force it on them. If they'd been more open and receptive to doing what I told them, let's write an essay, read the book and write me a book report. They don't do it. And so I found that there was just a lot of conflict trying to force them to do it. And so and here's the thing with real estate and how this is relatable. I did the same thing in homeschooling that I later did with real estate.
Mhm.
Who's already doing this? Who can give me advice? Who has older children that can say, you're not going to screw up your children if you do it this way? And just kept looking until I found a group of people who our philosophies aligned and that they were willing to be at the meetups and be at the gatherings to teach me. And this pattern that I had established came in really handy in real estate later because not only had I uncomplicated my homeschool life, that allowed me the time that I needed and also the model to go and say, okay, I did the same thing for homeschooling, some other things I wanted to learn. Why don't I do this? I found email lists, I found online groups, I found in person groups, I found courses, I found conferences. It's the same process for anything new that you want to do. You got to find people who are doing it because otherwise it's risky and scary because you feel like this weird trailblazer. And when you realize that there are other people out there who blazed that trail well before you did, it doesn't look so complicated and confusing. So those kinds of systems, eliminating, delegating, and simplifying have been huge for me in my personal time management skills. Take care of one big thing, and then the little things downstream will sort themselves out. And if they don't, then you can go downstream to the next bottleneck and repeat the process.
Those are great. You're speaking my language. I grew up in supply chain and operations, business degree. And one of the first things when I got to one of my early jobs in manufacturing, theory of constraints, just
Yep.
going from bottleneck to bottleneck and alleviating all of that. And yeah, the mantra of eliminate, automate, delegate, all those things. Yeah, they're just resonating with all of my
Yeah.
language.
People refer to it like putting out fires. And
Mm.
I think that's a very different mental image
Yeah.
that is more stressful, more mentally taxing. And you're looking at, oh, what fire do I got to put out
Yeah,
today?
that's an emergency
Yeah.
situation, right? Theory of
Yes.
constraints is you're making
Yes.
things flow better. Okay, it could be an emergency, but typically it's not, right? You're just
Yeah.
identifying, okay, I want this to I want the flow to improve. What do I tack first? And
Yep.
And how about we have a system that prevents the fires?
Yes. And
yes,
you're looking for the bottleneck or the potential fire. It's like a fire marshal coming to your house to do or to your business to do an inspection. And then he says, "Hey, this is a risk. Like you have a fire risk here because of you have these chemicals and stored improperly or whatever. I mean, you also have an escape risk there because the ladder is not installed correctly or whatnot." So in real estate, we have a lot of fire marshal inspections. And I always have paid a lot of attention to the way that they function because to me, that is the time when we're able to deal with a fire when it happens, to either prevent it before it happens, make sure that the escape routes are well mapped out if it does happen, and then having the after plan already in place, pre-interviewing a public adjuster for your insurance, things like this. That's how you run a business. And it's the same way that you run a household. And my kids told me when they were like 18, 20-ish around there, they would say, I feel like our interactions are very transactional. We are always talking about business. We're always talking about careers. We're always talking about money. And I just want to talk to you about what's going on with my boyfriend. And I get it that this part of your life really is a lot about career and finance. And when they expressed this to me, I said, okay, I need to take a step back and be able to say I can focus on more emotional things when we're together because we have the financial stuff and your career and your college and all that kind of stuff already worked out. And so just being able to say, I'm going to focus on that time with my family for this higher purpose of emotional connection and fun, spontaneous kinds of interactions, and setting your life up in a way that those kinds of things can happen naturally and not feel so wheezing into the cracks and filling in. So just being able to say, I'm going to put out fires, it really motivates me over here because then I have the emotional energy and the time to focus on so many people. I have 6 kids. My husband and I both have 7 siblings. So all of their spouses, all of their kids, parents, it's probably first degree relatives and their first degree in laws. Well, I don't know. What do we got? 80 people?
Oh my God.
It's a lot.
Yeah.
So yeah, it takes some thought on how to emotionally manage all that and time management for all of that.
100%. You touched on a couple of concepts that I'd like to pursue here. I think early on you mentioned I at least speak to, I don't know, dozens of people a month that want to get started in real estate, are really curious about it, but don't know how, right? There's just so many paths you can take. They don't really know how to take it. And you mentioned that early on in the podcast, as well as coupling that with finding really good mentors and coaches that align with your vision and personality and some of your goals. What was your start like beyond? You touched a little bit on some of your, let's just call them asset types along the way, but how did you decide to get going and where did you decide to invest your time and energy in building up?
So our friend in Texas who was flipping houses and asked us to give him a hard money loan. He never called it a hard money loan, but I remember our realtor that we bought our last house with, the one that we tore down and rebuilt. He was mentioning an investment property because we were talking about someday we wanted rentals. It was always one of the someday things, right?
Uh-huh.
And he was talking about an investment property that he had just purchased to flip himself. So the realtor. And he said, oh, hell, we didn't have enough money. My partner and I contributed. We had to get a hard money loan. And all of a sudden, hard money loan, I was thinking like shark money.
Yeah,
And
shark.
I
Yeah.
realized at that point that we probably should have been lending to our other friend flipping houses as his private lenders, even though I didn't have the words, the terminology to describe what was going on. Oh man, we really should have done that when we had the chance. So when we moved to Utah and I went to my first real estate club, the very first meeting, the president came over and she asked me who I was, what I was doing, all that. And I said, I have some cash to invest and I'm looking to do a hard money loan. And I hear this is the only piece of terminology that I knew. And she turned to the wider group because it's the beginning when everybody's just networking. And she turned and she said, this is Emma. She's new and she's looking to do a hard money loan. Raise your hand if you have a deal and you need some money. And a couple of people raised their hand and she introduced me to them and sent me to the back of the room. And while I was there, I met several people and they all said they couldn't use as much money as I had. And but they said, I know who can because he does so many flips. And he walked in a few minutes later and they're like, that guy. And a bunch of people are like, I have my retirement money with him because you can't retire. You can't invest your retirement money in your own deal just because
Right.
of the restrictions that the tax code puts on that. And so they would put their retirement money with this guy. And I was like, okay, if they're investing their own money with this guy, I know that there's something here. And when he came in, everybody was like happy to see him. Who's moving and shaking but he didn't come in with this air of, I am the god of the real estate club. That's a big turnoff to me. But he just came in just there to get some business done. It's super friendly. He became a great mentor to me. So the way that you get started, honestly, is if you have some money, just go invest it with somebody else, not necessarily buy their guru program, not necessarily buy their expensive education. I think that's a shiny object that we get sucked into. It's just if you have some real cash, 5 figures, 6 figures, just go invest it with somebody else. Maybe not put it all in one deal. That was a mistake that I made. I had massive buyer's remorse and it
Mm.
was fine. Took good care of me and everything worked out. But at the same time, I think it would have been better if I'd split it across a couple of smaller projects. And then when you have money with somebody, especially the kind of money that I had out with this flipper, they answer the phone when you call. They answer your questions. They mentor you for free. Like I always joke now when I see him, like, hey, there's the guy who paid me to learn about real estate. That's the best way to get it done. You're going to learn a lot, spread it out as much as you can, and learn from a couple of different people. And you're going to get a sense real quick what you like, what you don't like, and how much you want to do actively and how much you want to do passively. And that's a question most investors do not ever ask themselves.
Mhm.
It shouldn't be all one or the other. And if you have a job where you're making a really great income, maybe you could be 100% passive investor. But if you're looking to scrape up some more cash, doing a little bit actively, and then figuring out where you want to be passive in some sort of a commercial syndication, hard money loans, there are so many ways to do it. But you have two choices. You can do debt or you can do equity. Debt meaning like you're the lender and they're paying you an interest rate, or you can partner up with them where they're paying you part of the profits. You're splitting the profits. And that can also mean you're splitting the losses depending on how the project.
Yeah, we do similar with people we talk to because broad categories of resources, we have time and money and some combination of those. Some people have no time, a lot of money. Some people have a lot
Yep.
of time, no money. And it's also another powerful aspect of real estate is you can leverage your own sweat equity to get in and do some of the work for a portion of the equity. Or as you mentioned, if you have a lot of money or cash flow or whatever, you can go all or mostly passive
Yeah.
depending on your personality type and your goals and all of that. Yeah,
I
it's
had
great.
two, time, money, or experience. And I almost had three because I had time because I was not
Yeah.
working. We gave him my business. And then I had money because we'd sold that basically that live in flip that was supposed to be our forever home, but instead we sold it and it started a real estate business. And then the third would be experience. I had bought homes, I had remodeled homes. So I didn't have I would call that relevant experience rather than direct experience. And so being able to say, I've got two and a half of these things that I need, getting the other half of the experience is a factor of learning and also of doing and recognizing that I can only learn 50 to 80% of what I need to know from a book or from talking to other people. And then the other 20 to 50%, I've just got to go out and do it. And so that acknowledgement that I might get spanked and lose some money here was tough. And so what we did is we earmarked a certain amount of money to go towards our personal, like this, we're going to use to put on our home, our down payment. My husband's job could cover all of that without any income coming in for me. And the rest of it, we were earmarked as what my husband likes to call monopoly money. He said, just go use this, learn, invest, do whatever you need to. If you lose every dime of it, whatever, we made it on real estate, we'll lose it on real estate.
Yeah.
And so that for me freed me up to go get the experience that I needed without so much of the anxiety of what if I make a mistake.
Really important and a great mindset that you are going to make some mistakes. That is part of it should be part of the benefit of getting a coach and a mentor. And that's what we've done when we started up our businesses in the different asset classes is we made sure we partnered up with somebody who had the experience to help minimize any potential missteps or mistakes. But then also, yes, you have to recognize things are going to happen, right? Nobody foresaw a record run up in interest rates happening a few years ago. So a lot of people got caught into bad deals. It's just going to happen. And the mindset of we'll be able to make it up is a great one to carry you through these dramatic low points that can
Yeah.
happen.
If I'm gonna lose money on it because the market had a downturn, I'm certainly waiting for that opportunity. That opportunity that everybody's
Right.
talking about is, oh, it's the deals are coming, the deals are coming. When they're at the height of the market, and everybody's like, wait till this all
Right.
implodes or explodes, and then we're gonna go pick up the pieces. That shark mentality that real estate investors always get accused of. We're not creating it, but we're sure ready. We're sure ready for it. So if I'm gonna lose money by buying something at the height and it comes apart for whatever reason, like interest rates in 2023, I feel like I need to also be prepared to make money on the
Yeah.
backside to fix it. So I'm certainly not going to be one of those people who gets burned on the high side and then lets that make me afraid. Then now I'm going to miss out on the opportunity on the low side. You've got to be willing to take advantage of both. Take my lumps here. And boy, is that going to create opportunity because other people took their lumps, but I'm better diversified, better capitalized, and better networked to be able to go out and clean up the mess that certain people make. And my very first investment on my own, not a hard money loan, that person that I took that expensive course from basically wrote the first deal for me. It looks like he was filling out the purchase and sale agreements, spent a lot of time with me on the phone, just walking me through. Somebody I knew in my personal network was losing a home due to a long term layoff where they just could not find a job and things were just getting worse and worse over the course of the year that they were not working. And I called and said, I think I might be able to buy your house, because she would make jokes when people are like, well, I wish there was something I could do to help. She's like, buy my house, buy my groceries, give my husband a job. And I'm like, are you serious about buying your house? And they completely walked me through it. They helped me find a lawyer. They helped me structure everything. They helped me craft 3, 4, 5 options that I was able to present, and with a true intent to help them. Like, some of them were not good for me personally, and some of them were better for them. And here are the options, which you want to pick. That true intent to go out and help people out of a bad situation. Was that a bad situation? Yes. Was it any solution that I offered a good fairy wand that said, okay, you're going to save your house and save all the down payment money, the equity that you had in there, and go away with a great credit report and be able to fly off into land? Like, none of those solutions were good solutions. But what we're trying to do is stop the bleeding. And that's what I mean by taking advantage of things at the bottom. There are people out there who are hurting, not just in residential, but in commercial, who are hurting and who are just looking for the least bad solution. And we need to be prepared to be able to offer that when that comes up, because it will come up.
Yeah, 100%. Markets and cycles. And even within those cycles, you have people in different positions on those cycles. And so
Yep.
we do very similar in our land business. We do all we can to help people out of bad situations. We oftentimes bring them solutions that they haven't thought of or they aren't finding, or things like that, and just adding value in that way. So it can
I
be very,
think you have to be ready to say, I didn't win this deal because I brought them a solution that they hadn't thought about before. That was like, oh, we'll just do that. And then people often solve their own problem. And we go into that with that genuine spirit of helping people. And we're going to be able to help them maybe 90% of the time, and maybe 50% of the time, maybe even less than that. They'll choose the solution that also helps us. And you just have to keep going out there and putting it out there. You're going to not get the 30 to 50% where it is a win for both parties.
yeah, it sounds something that maybe dovetails with this. Earlier, I heard you talking about some deals that you are out there trying to find. It sounds like you're looking for some off-market type deals and working with owners to creatively finance or get them out of their properties. Is that?
At one point, yes. When COVID first hit, I had bought one apartment building. We had just closed on it March of 2020. And we were like, what have we just done? Because we had it under contract since the summer before COVID was a thing. And then we closed like March 6th or something like
Yeah.
that. And I was immediately hungry to go get the next one. And so what I ended up doing was finding a deal off market, a direct to owner. I was working with a wholesaler out of state who was bringing me various things, and she got her wholesale fee. You can wholesale commercial property. It's out there. You just got to find the people who are doing it. And that situation was like, nobody can get a loan on this property because it was a distressed property and it was COVID and everybody was still free. It was at the beginning where they were still saying like 10% death rate. Everybody was freaking out. And I said, let's just work out rent to own on an apartment building, because I was doing rent to own on some houses, and I would buy a house, put it back on the market as a rent to own. Sometimes it would just sell outright, but other times people would take me up on the seller financing of it. So I had a couple of private notes out and things like that. And I said, I do this. I've done this with a couple of houses. Do you want to talk about this with this apartment building? And he knew no one else was going to buy it. And even if he did get another offer on it, they weren't going to be able to get a loan on it. It was just not that kind of an environment. And so the second one that we bought was that way. This direct to owner off market stuff works really well with smaller mom and pop properties. Once we started getting into the larger stuff, 100, 150 units, those are broker relationships. And while you can ask them about seller financing, you should always ask commercial about seller financing. Most of the larger properties they're just not going to fly. The first and second lien situation gets to be such a mess. And sometimes you can partner with the owner to have him bring in his equity, especially if he owns it free and clear. It's like a building he's had for a while, to bring in his portion as like a Class C share that you set up just for that owner. That's pretty uncommon. Usually these larger buildings, those are not free and clear. It's owned by some sort of a joint venture conglomerate. You got 4 or 5 doctors who met each other at the hospital, or a company like mine. That's all they do is buy and sell apartments. So those options, creative options, start to go away the larger the property gets. And I've found that I prefer owning larger properties, because running a 30-unit apartment building is the same amount of effort as a 150-unit apartment building, almost identical as far as the amount of time that it takes me to run it. And the more properties you have, the more asset management you're going to do. So my duplex took less time than, say, a 50 unit, but 2 duplexes takes almost the same amount of time as a 50 unit. And so it just doesn't make sense to keep buying smaller properties, mom and pop style properties. We call those legacy properties. If you can get that by yourself, like you own a 12 unit or a 24 unit building on your own without partners, whether those are joint venture partners or investors, that's a legacy property where you do want to eventually figure out how to pay that off so that you can own it for a really long time. And you could be the mom and pop owner on that. But I don't think that those properties work as well for syndications unless you have some sort of a fund where you're purchasing multiple of them and you have this structure set up to raise capital. I don't enjoy owning them and I don't enjoy enjoy managing them. It's just not my thing. Was that the springboard for me getting this off the ground and being able to go find the things that I did really like doing? Absolutely. Would I change anything? Absolutely not. So it's just important to get your foot in the door, get in the game, and then keep pushing because you'll eventually land on the thing that really works for you. I'm not saying to quit and pivot all the time, shiny object syndrome. That's not what I'm saying at all. Go do the thing, go do it right, and then try to do the next thing. And eventually, after you do a couple of those, you'll start to hit your stride in what you really do enjoy.
Yeah, it doesn't have to be the case, but certainly there is a beauty in a progressive journey and experience. And you touched on this earlier in terms of investors and investing. We did this when we got into commercial real estate, is we did start as limited partners or LPs, right? We just passively invested in the deal, but we were also getting educated on what is the language even of this commercial real estate world, investor communications, what do we like, what do we not like? But you
Yep.
get certain insights behind the curtain. And then we stepped a little further into the active side of things with raising capital, doing the investor communication, bringing investors in. And so we had a journey across from passive income and limited partner all the way to owner operator, lead sponsor on some syndications. And really, it was that progression that allowed us to operate better at the back end and the back side of that. And I think even as a private investor, to your point, there is also, I talk to so many people who get tired of, or they foresee that the amount of single family rentals they're going to have any type of substantial passive income is
Yeah.
unachievable. And so they go into bigger
Okay, go.
100 unit
Yeah.
plus syndications, but you have to step, or you don't have to, but a lot of times it eliminates potential problems if you step into that rather than just go right into it. Can be done, but yeah, they are springboards a lot of times.
I've seen people do it. A commercial building is anything 5 units or above or anything that somebody does not live in. So a small warehouse unit, storage, infill, tucked in. I was gonna buy a fourplex that had a storefront in it, so 5 units, but the storefront, like, it's commercial property. So commercial property is most of real estate. So when people tell you you can skip residential and go straight to commercial, that is absolutely true. Should somebody's first deal be a 150 unit apartment complex? Not unless you're well networked. So I'll give you a story. One of my partners who was extremely well networked. He was a president of a fraternity that is a nationwide, it was one chapter at his school, nationwide fraternity, and it had a religious affiliation. And so he could get me on the phone with anybody. So he's 27 years old. He was doing underwriting for a subsidiary of a large lender. And so I was looking for a financial manager who was a hard worker and could manage the day-to-day finances and underwriting of a large deal that we were doing. And he came in, offered to work for free. And because he was such a hard worker and he was really talented at the underwriting side, but he was better at the networking side. I was like, you're almost wasted as a financial manager. Do you want to come and partner with me? And that was a 60 unit ground up high rise construction in downtown Salt Lake City. And as a 27-year-old, that was his first deal because he was well networked. He got me on the phone with family offices and the institutional investors that we needed to do that kind of deal. I wouldn't deal with institutional investors if you need less than $10 million. Just don't even bother. It is not the magic wandy wave that people think it's going to be. Oh, they're going to come in and they're going to write my or check.
They have too much
Just
leverage. Yeah.
don't. They flake out. Like
Yeah.
one $3 million check writer on a $3.5 million raise. That's a problem. And so from a risk management standpoint, just don't deal. But this was like a $24 million equity raise. And so we knew we needed to go institutional. He was finding opportunity zone fund managers, family office managers. He could put us on the phone with the vice president, some of the biggest lenders in the country, because he just called them up. They didn't know who he was. He would just say, "Hey, I'm the so and so fraternity," and he had his alumni list. So he'd find somebody that worked in that company on the alumni list, and then he would be able to get us on with a vice president or his boss, or he would know where to direct us. So he just kept doing that again and again. And so his first project was a 150 unit high rise, right? That's very unusual because he wasn't just well networked, but he was also not afraid of reaching out and making those new connections. Like he would work the phones like he was cold calling. And his second project, I introduced him to another developer. And because he did such a good job on the financial part and the networking part, he actually asked him to partner with him on a 350 unit new construction build right off of I-10 in Texas. And so that is a thing. I've seen it happen,
Yeah.
right? Is everybody in that position? Not necessarily. You need to have a high value skill that most people don't want to do, which is financial management, financial underwriting, and then or be also very well connected. And that makes a difference with what size projects you can bite off early on in your career. If you don't have those, and most people don't have those things, if you don't have those, then a progressive approach might be a little bit better. And also, the bigger the project that you're doing, the bigger emergency fund you need to have because those projects are thirsty. Something happened, you lose an underground sewer pipe, and suddenly you're looking for 170 grand to go do this major repair because it has to have foundation above it. Like people who are broke have no business running these kinds of properties, even unless you have very wealthy partners and you're willing to do the grunt work and you probably don't know what you're doing. That's why you're broke because you haven't done it. If you do it enough times, you're not gonna be broke anymore. And so it's this really tricky chicken and egg type of
Mhm.
situation. And I just caution everybody to be thinking about what kind of emergency fund do you need to have, especially in development. You don't get paid for years, right? Keeping your lights on, being able to feed the hungry property. It's that fly trap. It's feed me Seymour. It's a lot like that. So you just have to be prepared. You have to know a lot of people and you have to be willing to go out there and meet a lot of people. And that's how you decide, am I going to start with a single family house and work up? How far up do I want to work? How far do I want to get into this? How much of a security blanket you have? These are all things that people need to consider when they're just deciding what kind of projects do I want to take on.
Great tips.
Yes. And education is so important. In real estate, there's so many asset classes and there's so
Yeah.
many ways of doing things. And it's important for people to know what is a good fit and for their
Mhm.
budgets, for their personalities, and the tolerance for risk.
One thing I'm willing to do that a lot of people are not willing to do is form partnerships. So I'm not actually that great at raising capital because I'm not the kind of person who's going to call you and be like, hey, I haven't talked for 5 years. I got a real estate deal. Like that's really difficult for me to do. And so people who are willing to do that are going to raise more capital than me. But the thing that I'm willing to do that most people are not, one, I'll live in my own flip, right? Terrible conditions so that we can make money from the exercise. And so most people aren't willing to do that. I am. Another thing that I am willing to do is make partnerships. And I've had some really disastrous partnerships over the years. Nobody's stolen money from me and escaped to the Caymans or anything like that. But just personality conflicts
Okay.
where once the deal is sold, we're going to choose not to work together again. And that's the nice thing about real estate is these deals are short lived, 2 years, 3 years, when things are at the height, 5 to 7 when they're not. And so my willingness to look for people and to form partnerships has been my ticket to success. Not everybody should be doing that. Not everybody's good at doing that. Not everybody's willing to do that. But you have to ask yourself, like, what is it that I am willing to do that
Mhm.
when other people hear about it, a common reaction is, if you're okay with that, then maybe that's your secret sauce. For me, when people are like, it's hard to just look in your phone and call somebody you haven't talked to for a while, you're saying, I haven't talked to for a while. Let's catch up and see what we're doing. And I'm thinking, oh, I don't want to do that. That's their secret sauce. So think to yourself, what am I good at or at least willing to do that doesn't scare me, that doesn't gross me out? On a scale of 1 to 10, it's like 10, I hate this, I'm never doing it. A 2 is I can handle that. But other people think it's an 8 or a 9. You're onto something.
Yeah, we learned that when we got into commercial. We came in with an idea of some skill sets that we would bring into partnerships. And quickly you find out that everybody, especially, I think it was around 2020, 2019, when we decided to pivot into or to diversify, let's say, into commercial real estate, it was money. There were so many deals that were being taken down. Everybody
Yep.
was looking for capital. And so we pivoted a bit and said, okay, let's activate capital raising side of things. It's not my passion either. It's not something that I go to and we don't do a whole lot of it, but it is a strong skill set that people can bring in any of these asset classes, but especially as you get into larger and larger deals,
Yeah.
partnerships are really where it's at. And I'd be curious to hear, we struggle with this as well. And I hear so many people that also talk about it. And I don't think there's really a great formula, but any lessons or learnings along your journey of going about picking better partners than not? Or is it just a matter of giving it a shot, dating for a bit, and deciding if you're going to go into the next deal?
Oh boy. I think this is why I am willing to do this. A lot of people are like, oh, partners, they just screw you over, things don't go well, and suddenly you're fighting. I'm willing to do it because I'm from a large family and there are a lot of interpersonal conflicts. And some of it's high drama, some of it's not a big deal, but you just really get used to dealing with people with different personalities and being able to say, look, we're going to all just find our zone of possible agreement and figure out how we're going to rub along together because you can't fire your family members, you can't fire your kids. And so when you are in a situation where you can't fire them, suddenly you're very interested in improving your communication skills. And so I spent a lot of time reading communication books. It was very important to me. I think partially because there's a lot of autism in my family, and so the communication is not exactly easy for us. So one, I'm super interested in communication books because to me it's earth shattering kind of information. Whereas somebody who's very charismatic and they're already good at that might read a book that I think is amazing and be like, what? Of
Yeah.
course you're people like that. So for me, finding those books that made me be like, what? You get very interested in it because it's high stakes when it's an in-law or a child, an adult child, or your spouse or something like that, where you really just can't fire this person. So I just really dived into learning how to communicate, learning how to do conflict resolution, finding process bottlenecks could also be people, right? It doesn't necessarily have to be anything else. And usually it is people, honestly,
Many
like
times, yes.
Yes.
bottlenecks are other human. So finding good partnerships is one, the willingness to know that you really need partnerships to be able to scale. Dave Ramsey's whole, the only ship that's guaranteed to sink is a partnership. And I've also a relationship, Dave. That's you're married, you have children, you have, of course, business partners are just an extension of that. Somebody told me that business partners are like being married without benefits. And it's true, especially if you have multiple partners in the same deal. You might get along, but then two of them
Yeah.
are fighting. And my husband says when he was working, he was often called office dad. And I'm often called in my real estate partnerships group grandma because we spend a lot of time just working through these interpersonal conflicts and being able to, and my husband's an IT guy, so he can really systematize when he sees something going wrong and he finds either a bottleneck or a recurring problem, he can step back and say, okay, what systems are we going to put into place to make sure that we can reduce this? So that's partnerships. It's not just necessarily dating. I like the fact that real estate partnerships are short. Getting a really good partnership questionnaire from your attorney, like these are the questions we should be asking each other as we're creating our operating agreement. And how many partnerships have you heard of people going into where they're breaking up and you're like, what does the partnership agreement say? And they're like, we don't have one. What? Like, there, I can see maybe going into a marriage where nobody has any assets, there's no prenuptial agreement. But going into a partnership without a partnership agreement or an operating agreement on your LLC, that's insane. That's insane. And those things are there to protect you from a lot of the interpersonal conflicts that can come with saying, hey, I want to go start another business. I want to get divorced. My kid hit somebody and they're as a drunk driver. Like these things happen, right? So having a really good partnership questionnaire that you can go hammer these things out, sit down, spend a couple of hours, a weekend retreat, working those out, super, super important. And then that's what you give your attorney to draft your operating agreement. So all of those things have been pre-thought of. Needs a unanimous vote? What needs a quorum vote? How much money can we loan to the company when they're in trouble? And Seymour's saying, feed me Seymour. And what interest rate are we going to pay that? Are we going to give them equity? Who's actually going to be doing the valuations? Because if somebody wants bought out, who's going to do the spreadsheet? That's complicated. Who's going to take care of this stuff? What roles people have? Who can sign on the bank account stuff? Who can't? Like all of that kind of stuff is in a really good partnership agreement. And then because that kind of stuff is taken care of, again, it's the same thing that transactional business stuff is taken care of. And it's like with my kids, where now I get to really focus on relationships and moderating or mediating interpersonal conflicts because I don't have to worry about the rest of the stuff that could explode in our faces. I get to focus really hard on company culture. And company culture it's so hard. It's so hard. You can't put that in an operating agreement. So just being able to look at the group dynamics and be able to say, what recurring problems are we seeing again and again? And what are some solutions that we can propose to fix this? So I feel like I'm always in a company culture battle with every partner that I'm in. You'll solve one, another come up. So it's definitely not my special gift, but I recognize how important it is, and I try to put in the time to do it. Sometimes I just retreat. I just go back into my shell because it's so draining. And when I'm not being a very good leader, I'm not being a very good partner, And I have to pull myself out of that and say, okay, we need to have the hard conversations so we can fix these culture issues that we're struggling with. So just understanding that before you go into a partnership, either you or somebody on the team needs to be really skilled or willing to become skilled at navigating. And you can't scale without partnerships. You just can't. You'll see some solopreneurs talking about, oh, I got a 6-figure a year business that I'm running, doing a graphic design or ghostwriting or whatever it is. And they're selling how to be a solopreneur so they can make 6 figures. And for me, I'm like, I want to make $1 million a year, $500,000 a year. That's my goal. There's no solopreneur or anything I could probably be doing that is going to earn me that kind of money. So for me, the partnerships were mandatory.
That's beautiful.
Yeah.
It's we've learned so much, and it's so sad that we are almost at the top of the hour, and we are approaching the closing. Because I feel like I could just listen to you for like hours and hours. It's been really nice.
Think that.
Yeah, no, it's quite the opposite. Yeah. Although it sounds like you have a little different relationship with your kids.
Yeah.
If
They're
if they're self-enrolling into college and things like that.
No, but you have given us so many golden nuggets, and it's been really fantastic.
Yeah.
But Emma, we like to close our podcast with gratitude. And has it been anyone? It doesn't have to be just one person, but did you want to shout out to that has been instrumental to your journey and where you are today?
Number one is my husband. This is talking about partnerships. That partnership will make or break. And people will ask me, like, how do I get my spouse on board? I want to go do whatever. Or I'm like, I don't know. Like, I really don't. He has just always been on board. That's not to say that everything's perfect and it's always smooth sailing. These partnership techniques that we talked about are going to equally apply to the marital relationship. And now that he's in the business, he's working in the business with me, I can definitely say like his ability to earmark money that I can go feel free to lose as monopoly money, or him being able to lend my business money out of his W-2 income, his ability to say, your bookkeeping is a mess. Let's sit down and fix it together. And him learning how to use QuickBooks, even though that's not his core competency. Like those things about him willing to support me. He told me years ago, we were falling asleep one night and we were almost asleep. And then I hear him whisper, if we're going to be really wealthy ever, that's up to you. And at the time I thought, oh, thanks, honey. That's a lot of pressure. But I think he realized that I have this drive to make money. I'm willing to live below my means. And he's been right in there living in our live-in flips. I'm willing to do some crazy stuff. And he's like, go for it. I remember one time telling him, I said, I want to go to Iceland. And he started laughing. Like, I said, Stephanie, so think about all the weird and crazy things we've ever done in our lives. And it's because I said something one day, go to Iceland, right? And he stopped. He said, that's true. And that recognition that the adventures that we go on and the things that we can do require risk taking, require trust, and require emotional support, but also the logistic support like QuickBooks. And he has been there every step along the way. And all of the other relationships that I've been able to form that had more of a tactical benefit, like actual partners, things, people who are doing actual work in the business, have all been facilitated by him telling me like, babe, go for it.
It's beautiful. And I can resonate with that because I work and live with a partner who's done that for me, really. I spent decades in the W-2 world, in the corporate world. And when we decided to go become entrepreneurs, Ligia was super supportive and more risk welcoming than me, which I think has allowed us to be able to do a lot of that. But yeah, those partnerships are great. We talk to a lot of people who will say, how do you guys work and live together and do all this stuff? I could never work with my spouse. And it never even was a question for us. When we had the opportunity, we were like, yeah, let's go. And we just divide up tasks, figure things out, collaborate, all of that. And there's no judgment or no blaming or shaming or anything like that. We're in a mission together and we figure it out. And so it is a beautiful thing. And yeah, I'm glad you guys have that. And it's essential, I think, to really growing as high as you want at the speed that you want. So great call out. Thanks again for joining us on the podcast. We enjoyed it so much. It was packed with a lot of insights and nuggets. And yeah, we'll have to continue the discussion. Although I think I'll be continuing some of the discussion on your show here in a little bit. But
we're gonna go have I'm a human being and need to go use the bathroom break.
Yeah, bio breaks all around. That's yeah, no problem.
Go do the interview over on my show.
Right on.
I have a question though, for anybody that would like to reach out to you if they are interested to know more about what you're doing. What is the best way?
My podcast is called Passive Income Adventures. It's on iTunes, Spotify, YouTube, everywhere. That's a good way to what I call online stalk me to see, do we align on our values? Is this something that you want to have a conversation? Do you want to subscribe to my email list where we share deals, that kind of thing? If you want to be a passive investor in what we're doing, go to Emma.com and that just takes you right to my calendar. I give you all the information that you need and give you some resources. If our fund is a good fit for you, we can get you started on our private portal. But if it's for whatever reason not a good fit, you're not accredited, you want to have your own real estate business, I can help to point you in the direction of some of the resources that can help you do that. So the more conversations we have, the more opportunities we'll uncover. And so I make myself very available by not only doing the podcast so people can hear all these conversations I'm having with other people, but also to have a conversation directly with me at with Emma.com.
Love it. We'll drop all that into the show notes. And again, thanks so much for sharing a little bit of time and a lot of wisdom with us.
Thank you. This is fun. I love the longer format podcasts where we can really just have a conversation instead of
100%. Yeah,
talking.
we're
So
fans too.
Thank you,
All
Emma.
right. Talk to you soon. Bye-bye.
thank you so much.
For those of you joining us today, we hope you enjoyed this time in the Champions Corner as much as we did. Got some awesome takeaways, and most importantly, will take action to continue living your best life and maximizing your potential. Mindset is such an important aspect of life, and when coupled with action, delivers undeniably powerful results.
Please subscribe to the podcast to hear from more great guests and get the latest mindset mastery insights and cash flow matchups.
Again, thank you so much for investing your time with us, and we look forward to seeing you next time on the Cashflow Fight Club podcast.